Hi everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan and welcome to part 3 of my story about why I reported a bully to the police and what happened when I did. In this part, I'm going to talk about those comments he made that were the final straw. Before I do, I want to slip in something that I hadn't originally planned to say, but it was inspired by a new search I've just done to see if he's still going on about me. And I came across a tweet he posted in July this year, 2021. Katie Montgomery had asked a totally extraordinary and demented question about whether any trans people had ever threatened legal action against gender critics. He must have known the answer to that. This tweeter responded quite reasonably, asking if Monty had never heard of one notoriously litigious trans activist. I may have mentioned him in previous videos in this series. And they added that the bully I reported to the police had threatened legal action against me, which he did. So the bully quote tweets it. I'll just show the first part of his tweet for now. He says, "I've never threatened Maria McLachlan in my life, as if she's a fucking bruiser. She'd batter me." This is part of the myth he and others are still trying to perpetuate, that although I'm in my 60s and about 1.65 meters tall, about 5'4½", in their fevered imaginations, I am this gigantic brute who can single-handedly take on 3 men less than half my age and drag them around and thrash them up and down. It's true that this man has never physically threatened me, but that's not what the tweet he was responding to was about. The question was about threatening legal action, which he did. Back in May 2019, I received a couple of emails from this bloke that were sent about half an hour apart, and they were complaining about a blog post I wrote entitled "Rattling the Honey Badger's Cage." It was about a troll who had tried to leave hundreds of very abusive and sometimes threatening comments on my blog and on the blogs of many other gender critics. Total nutter. I had never bothered to inform the police about this troll, but I know of 2 others who did. One of them only reported him after receiving a clear and credible threat of violence against her. The other person who complained, having gathered evidence of his abuse from nearly 30 people he's targeted, tells me she pushed as hard as she could, but again, the police weren't bothered. Honey Badger should really have tweeted some pictures of ribbons or something for the police to take any notice. Anyway, my bully seemed to think that in the blog post I wrote, I was implying that I thought he was the Honey Badger. On that post I show Honey Badger's first comment to me, which starts, "You're a lying twat, you Maria, an ugly, old, hateful little slag. You got what you fucking deserved that day in Hyde Park. It's a pity Tara didn't shut you up permanently." And he ends by telling me to fuck off and die, and he calls my husband a nonce. Okay, I haven't shown these emails in full before, but I'm now making them available on my site. Just now, I'm going to highlight 3 things from the first email. First, he says, "I have never once in my life spoken to any woman using any of those terms." Okay, time for a little reminder of terms he has used to and about women. But as long as he doesn't call us hateful little slags, I'm sure we're very grateful. He even says, "I make no bones about this. Those things that were said to you were disgusting. I don't believe anyone should have to put up with that. Seriously, is this guy for real? Look at what he does expect people to put up with." And this leads to my second highlight. But let me make myself very clear once and for all. We fell out. No, we didn't fall out. This suggests that we once had some kind of friendly relationship or acquaintanceship. We didn't. Remember, the very first thing he ever said to me was to call me a raging turf, imbecile, etc. I didn't even know he existed before he turned up and posted that on the Facebook thread I commented on in the last video. It gets better. But this is now bordering on a campaign of harassment. You have multiple mentions of me on this blog and various insults. Yes, I had exposed a tiny fraction of his appalling behaviour and lies on my blog, and I've called him stupid or similar. I mean, the cap fits. But this is far beyond that. This is flat out malicious defamation, says the man who has repeatedly and maliciously lied about me in hundreds of tweets and has never stopped. How utterly unsurprising to know that he can't take a tiny speck of what he spends half his life giving out. How pathetic. Thirdly, I will be seeking legal advice for malicious communications, defamation and harassment at the beginning of next week. You have the weekend to remove these baseless lies. If this page is not removed over the weekend, there will be action taken. Now, I took that as a threat of legal action, and although arguably the action he said would be taken could have been action of some other sort. Of course, there were no baseless lies in that blog post, and all I could do when I got that email was laugh out loud and then ignore it. The blog post he doesn't like is still up, and it's not going anywhere. Now to reveal the second part of his tweets, which, as I said, was posted in the summer of this year, 2021, 10 months after I'd reported him to the police. You see, at the bottom he says that I am on record as being a racist, and he has receipts. That baseless lie brings me to the main business of this video. Earlier this year, as a sort of prequel to this video, I made a two-part video in which I recounted what happened in Hyde Park on 30th of August 2020, when a group of feminists were aggressed at Speaker's Corner by a much larger group of people who'd been on a Black Lives Matter march. I showed all the footage that I could get my hands on, and I exposed how this same individual, the bully, who again hadn't even been present, and several others as well, had again come up with a made-up version of events, and I showed the defamatory tweets they made about some of us. I cannot begin to describe how angry and distressed I was to see these comments. That is not something that I find easy to admit to, because he will totally get off on knowing that I was upset, because that's why he does it, and that's the kind of person he is. He's a bully. It was way back in January 2020, after I posted the video showing everything that happened when I was assaulted at Speaker's Corner and highlighting his responsibility for the false narrative that has been circulating ever since, that he started this new tack of calling me a racist on the basis of no evidence whatsoever. I addressed it in the introduction to the abridged version of my Speaker's Corner video, still in January 2020. The one I take very strong exception to is the allegation that I am or ever have been racist. I don't know why I would say something like that, apart from out of a desperation to try and smear my character and reputation when he has got nothing. There is not one iota of evidence anywhere that I have ever been racist, and in fact I have participated in many anti-racist campaigns throughout my life. So there is no evidence that I'm a racist, but how do you prove you're not something? Attending a public protest saying no to racism, perhaps? But I've no doubt these nutters would find some way of reconciling that picture and any other evidence like that with what they want to believe. In September 2020, 3 years after the assault on me, after he'd repeatedly accused me of dining out on the assault, and in spite of the wealth of evidence that gives the lie to his fantasy version of it, he was still accusing me of having deliberately taunted the thugs who attacked me. And now, after this, let's call it what it is, after this attack on us by gender cultist BLM marchers, none of whom, by the way, were suggesting we were racists. They were calling us transphobes. And my tormentor was inventing a new narrative, again casting me as the villain in an incident which the evidence shows quite clearly was started by the BLM marchers. But what was unendurable for me was the repetition of the lie that I'm a racist. Here he is defaming Kelly J and a bunch of her friends, saying we are a racist, white supremacist gang. And here he is calling us Nazis. Well, that's a step too far. I know it's been said by others many times, but this fashion, this penchant nowadays for flinging out the word Nazi at people you disagree with is an insult. It disrespects everyone who suffered under the Third Reich, and that includes both my parents and their families, especially my mother's family, who from a country that was occupied by the Nazis. And as someone who was born in the post-war period, I grew up knowing from the earliest age of the suffering that had been endured by so many of my parents' generation and their parents. That is something this bully and his acolytes are not capable of understanding, because if they did, they surely wouldn't behave as they do. Their conscience wouldn't allow it. Okay, here is a tweet from someone who thinks I have a criminal conviction for some kind of racist attack or harassment in the past. Where could he have got that idea from? Because it wasn't from anything I have said or done in my entire life. I have no convictions. I've never even been arrested, let alone charged with anything. The bully responds without confirming or denying, but with yet more hateful lies. She has a reputation as an Islamophobe. Last week it was anti-Semitism and lesbophobia. She's a busy girl. There was no doubt in my mind that this was to be the test case and the police would fail it miserably, as indeed they did. I'll tell you what happened with them in part 4. Bye for now.